Who in here, in your household, who cooks? Like someone who is usually like in charge of the kitchen. Usually it's not, we say that we share. It's like, yeah, we both do it. Someone usually does it a little bit more, right? So anybody else? I'm actually the one that likes to make messes in the kitchen more than my wife. She likes to clean it. Actually, she likes having a clean kitchen, so therefore she does clean it. I like to make the messes. I think it's so much fun. But have you ever tried to make a recipe and then forgot one thing? Or you got it just a little bit wrong, like you substituted salt for sugar. Whoops. That's happened. I watched the Great British Bake Off, whatever show that, and that's happened multiple times where people accidentally put salt in for sugar and they give it to the judge and they have like smiles on their face, like this is gonna be so great, and the judge goes, oh, and it's a bad situation. One small detail ruins the whole thing, right? Have you experienced that? Or maybe it's a little bit more as far as a team goes. You're like part of a team at work or somewhere, or a sports athletic team, and someone else got invited to it. They're like, they're going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. Everyone's going to work together really, really well. They have a skill set that we don't have already, and they're really excited. And they get into the team, and all of a sudden you realize they're a bit emotionally rugged, might be a way to put it. And it's just a tension-filled environment all of a sudden. And before everything flowed smoothly, it was great, it was wonderful. One small detail ruins the whole thing, right? We're going to talk about something today. Something that if you neglect, actually, something that if you forget about, something that you can and will have a massive impact on your whole entire outlook on life. Everything that you do, everything that you experience, every relationship you have, every decision that you make is impacted by this one single thing. So you're gambling with something that is incredibly important if you don't take note to what we're going to be talking about. A single decision, one single decision, can move you in a direction and down a path you had no intentions of going down. You ever find yourself in a spot where you're like, I don't know how I got here, but this is not where I wanted to end up. This is not where I thought I'd be. This is not where I thought I'd be at this point in my life. This is not what I thought I'd be doing. This looks different. And you trace it back, you're like, I can't really put my finger on the one single decision, but there was one. There was a choice that led to another choice, that led to another choice, and you end up here where you're at. Something that was left unguarded in that moment allowed you to slip into a current, into a direction that you had no intention of moving into. It invites risk, actually. Nehemiah, we're not actually talking about Nehemiah very much. We'll talk about Nehemiah a little bit. Nehemiah in the Bible, this is an important biblical character figure. He was the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. So this is a pretty big deal. His life was on the line every single day. Can you imagine this? This was your job. Like everyone that wants to poison the king, it was your job to make sure the king doesn't die from it, so you would eat or drink first. So it was like, yeah, I'm still alive, still here, so you're good to go. And if I'm not, then don't eat it, I guess. That's a bit of a stress-filled job, I would say. But Nehemiah, his lineage was actually from Israel. And he found out that Jerusalem, kind of the crown jewel of Israel, was broken down at this time. He was not living there. But his hometown, his home village, like where everything was from, that he cared a lot about, even though he wasn't living there, was broken down. They had the walls, the gates, everything was broken down. There was no protection for Jerusalem at this point. So Nehemiah, who is the king trusts Nehemiah because he has a life, a heartbeat. That's the only reason why I trust him. And because he's trustworthy, like he's not going to lie to the king. But all he's doing is like keeping the king alive, and the king could end his life like that. Anybody could have their life ended in a moment if the king chose to do so. And Nehemiah actually tells the king, he's like, hey, I know you could end me right now, but I care a lot about Jerusalem, even though I don't live there anymore, even though I'm here with you. I've got a job to do, but I really care about that. I care about where I'm from. Would you let me go and rebuild the wall? This was a huge risk. His life was in the king's hands. Not only did the king say yes, the king says not only that, I'll give you the time off, I'll let you go, and I will give you supplies to do it. So there's this really cool moment where Nehemiah is rebuilding the wall. He's cast vision. He's gathered everyone together in this area, and they're like, yeah, we don't have a wall. And he goes, I noticed that. How about we do something about it, though? So he's not a construction worker. He doesn't know what he's doing, really. He's figuring it out on the fly. But he's up on the wall building in this one moment. And there's some distraction, and some people are trying to get him to come down from the wall. And he's like, enough of this. Enough of your noise. What I'm doing is too important. I am doing a great work. I will not come down from this wall. He determined that rebuilding the wall, protecting the city, because there was no protection if you had no wall at this time in context. Anyone could come and go as they please. They could steal and get away with it, like if they just wanted to. So he determined that this was so important that he was not willing to let anything get in the way of building this wall back up. Now, that's what we're going to be talking about as a whole this morning. Rebuilding walls, making sure that the walls are up in our life in the right place. But one really important detail is we have to know what we're protecting in order to make sure that we have the right wall built. I'm not gonna say any names, but there's some folks that live near us that they have chickens, and I know that because they're in the road all the time. They don't have the appropriate fence or wall or barrier to keep the chickens in. And at some point, they're just playing with danger. Like, at some point, there's going to be some feathers on the road. Like, that's what's going to happen. Some high school kid is going to done. Right? That's what happens. When you risk things long enough, eventually the risk is going to catch up with you. So we got to make sure we have the right wall for the right and the right barrier for the right thing that we're trying to protect. This is far more important than some chickens. I know there's probably some chicken lovers out there. That's great. This is even more important than chickens. This morning we're going to discuss something that protecting will impact everything that we do. Everything that we do. We're looking at a specific verse, and we're going to kind of talk around it for a while. But I'm going to tell you about the author first. So this is found in the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is written by Solomon. Solomon was the third king of Israel. His father was King David. Kind of a big deal, right? Solomon is also known as the wisest man to ever live. So we should take note to what he writes down, to what he tells us. All of this takes place, just for context's sake. He reigned for about 40 years, and it takes place just a little shy of 1,000 years before Jesus shows up. So just to have that all put into place. So Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. This is possibly one of my favorite verses of all time. He writes, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So we're going to take this piece by piece. Above all else. Above all else. This means that it's primary, that it's priority, that it's predetermined. There is nothing that is elevated above this choice, this decision. That you actually have gone through, you've predetermined. Nothing's going to slip ahead of it. It is the priority above everything else. Right? Think about this. Wisest man that ever lived says, above all else. I don't know, I might just not be that intelligent, but for me, when I hear the wisest man in the world say this, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll listen to what you're going to say. I'm going to do that because that seems like it makes sense above all else. It's predetermined. Like, this is not something that you accidentally do in the moment. You make a decision ahead of time that what we're talking about, that this element, this aspect of guarding your heart is more important than anything else, so that when anything else comes up, you decide, oh, this is secondary to guarding my heart. This is going to compete with guarding my heart, so I'm not going to do that. There's a moment a couple weeks ago, and it's a sad moment. It's a good moment, but it was like the beginning of the sad. So I don't know if you're familiar with the March Madness basketball tournament, NCAA tournament. I like Gonzaga, and this was the last happy moment of their season. So Gonzaga was playing UCLA. The game was really close. It was a fantastic, super exciting game. Right towards the end of the game, they're going to have maybe one, maybe two possessions, probably just one possession left. It's Gonzaga's ball, and they're behind. They inbounds the ball to their guard, and he takes like two dribbles. He's just a step or two from half court and launches a shot. Everybody is just like, what is he doing? Like, that's not, they didn't run a play. There was no screen. There was nothing. He didn't even like run fast. He just kind of stepped into it. From the logo, this guy is way out there. And just drills it, like makes it. And everyone goes crazy, right? And in the moment, if you're just a fan that's just kind of watching from a distance, you're like, that was crazy. How lucky was that? Like, that was amazing. And it was really amazing because UCLA got one more shot and they missed. So Gonzaga wins. Yay! But that, like I said, is the last happy moment. We won't talk about that. So if you're sitting there watching the game, you're thinking, whoa, that was really just lucky that he did this. But if you listen to the interviews afterwards, both the coach and the players said, no, this wasn't just spur of the moment. This was something that in their practices, they repeat. They do this on a regular basis. For that particular player, this is within his skill set. This is within his wheelhouse. He knows to do this. So when it was available, when it was open, at the end of the game, all of that practice came into play. And he had the absolute confidence to just bury a half-court shot just about in order to win the game. It's amazing what happens when you predetermine something. You've decided already, I'm going to make this decision. When my opportunity comes, this is the choice I'm making. There is so much value in that. So guard your heart. This is the next thing we're talking about. Guard your heart. Above all else, nothing else is more important than this. Guard your heart. A couple things in this 3-word sentence here, or statement here. This whole entire section of Scripture is about the pursuit of wisdom. Right? Everything about what Solomon is writing is about pursuing wisdom, finding out wisdom in your life. And in order to do this, we have to guard our heart. In order to get wisdom into our life, we have to protect our heart. Why? Because our heart is one of the places that wisdom resides. This is where our faith resides. I think of it this way. If you want to get wisdom in your life, you place yourself in the path where you know wisdom is going to happen. What Solomon's saying is, this isn't an effort thing. This is a decision to place yourself not working harder, but deciding ahead of time what's probably likely going to happen. The way that I think about this is when I was hunting a lot. I was an archery hunter, and I tried to do this. When I knew the area, when I knew the animals that I was after, I would try to place myself where they were going to be because I knew their habits, I knew the behavior, I knew the routes, I knew where they were going to go drink water, I knew where they were going to eat, I knew where they were going to bed down in the afternoon. I knew all those things, so I just decided I was going to place myself in their path, in their way. I wasn't going to go try and chase them down, put more and more effort into it. I was going to place myself in the path of the animal, and in our case, in the path of wisdom. And when you do that, you will get run over by wisdom. It's amazing what happens. If I can do a little plug here for men's group, we meet on Wednesday mornings at 6:15 at Rose Hours, and I love going there because you don't know what's going to be said. You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know this every single week. I'm placing myself in the pathway of wisdom. That what's going to be said at that table or those tables is going to increase the wisdom in my life. So it's important. It's valuable. I don't have to go and put a bunch of effort into it. I just need to place myself in the pathway of wisdom. Exactly, the language that Solomon uses here, I enjoy. Guard. This is like a temple guard or a palace guard. It's proactively reactive, this word, this language, guarding. You decide that you're going to keep the things out that need to be kept out, right? So what exactly needs to be kept out? Well, if you're talking about a temple or a palace, you want to make sure that it's not anything that's dangerous. You want to make sure that it's not anything that it's even going to be distracting. Whoa, we keep out distracting things? Absolutely we keep out distracting things. You go to the nth degree of protecting what's inside, what's most important, right? This is because your heart is where your feelings, it's where your intellect, it's where your will, all of those things, that's your heart. Your heart is like the untouchable part that is you. It is the center of you. The part that's uniquely you. So we better try to keep what we should out. The things that need to be out, we need to keep those things out. Whatever that is. Whatever we need to keep out, we keep out. And maybe it is, I'm going to give you an illustration. This might sound silly to some of you. but this is just how I live my life. Amy and I, when we got married, first of all, we both have fantastic parents. Secondly, we had really good premarital counseling, and I think that this has shaped our marriage. So what needs to be kept out? You can go to that slide. What needs to be kept out? I don't know if that's a slide. There we go. What needs to be kept out? So Amy and I, we got married about 20 years ago, and our premarital counselor said something that it just put to words what I'd felt before. She said, you have to go so far to protect what's most important. And it's not like if you feel like it, you go to the nth degree of protecting it. Amy and I, you will never hear us joke about divorce. You will never hear us joke about leaving each other. Like, oh, you do that again, I'm out of here. Like, that's never a joke that we're going to say. And I know that sounds antiquated, it sounds silly, it sounds extremely like, are you serious? Like, why would you do this? If you've ever had premarital counseling with me, I say this every single time. And the reason being is because a joke has a thought attached to it. And a thought that makes its way into your brain gets entertained. And at some point, regardless of where you're at some point when you're tired, you're exhausted, you can start to engage with a thought that you had no plan on engaging with. And that thought can take you somewhere. In my marriage is too important to even allowing a thought enter my brain. I will do whatever I can to keep it as far away as possible. We don't joke about divorce. Another word for this is guardrails in our life. We talk about guardrails here at Canaan's Church a lot. Guardrails are placed well before danger. If you're thinking about driving, this is where the illustration comes from. A guardrail is not put in place in danger. It's put in place well before danger. Why? Because eventually you're going to be distracted. You're going to bump into the guardrail. But when you bump into the guardrail, you better not have a guardrail where you're already in danger. You have to have the guardrail where you're not in danger. You're just scraping paint. That's all you're doing, right? You're not falling off the cliff. So guardrails have to be on the other side. They have to be on the safe side, not on the danger side. They have to be put in a place where the world around you is going to look at you and say, are you serious? You do what? Why would you? There's nothing wrong with that. That's not even a moral issue. Why would you choose that? And you say, well, the thing that I'm trying to protect is more important than a silly idea. I don't care. If it looks silly, it's more important than that. I'd rather be silly with a marriage intact than not be silly and have a marriage that I really don't enjoy anymore, or is failing, or is running its course, and I'm like, I guess it's over. That's not what I want. So your heart is really, really important. And we have to make sure that we keep everything out. Even if we think it's just a distraction, we got to keep everything out that shouldn't be there. Your heart is where faith resides also. That's another element of your heart. So another piece that, as far as why this is really important, we got to guard our faith palace, right? Paul actually, so we're gonna look at some people that say some words about this idea of guarding your heart. One, we talked about Solomon already. We're going to continue to, though. We're going to look at the Apostle Paul. He wrote like half of the New Testament. Pretty big idea guy. And then we're going to look at some words from Jesus. So some pretty heavy hitters in the idea of like who we're listening to this morning. But the Apostle Paul, he writes this in terms of protecting and guarding your heart. In a letter he wrote to some folks in Galatia, he says, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. I love this verse again because this is another one of those statements that's kind of like above all else. Like the only thing that counts. This is a highest priority piece that he's saying right here. Paul is on the other side of Jesus. So Solomon didn't have Jesus yet. Paul does. He says the only thing that counts is faith, your confidence in your Heavenly Father, expressing itself through love. It's not just the vertical relationship that matters. It's your expression outwardly to those around you that's actually communicating love and expressing love to your Heavenly Father as well. He continues on. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? There's a bunch of things in here. First of all, obeying, just to get this out of the way. We often, when we read the Bible, we read words like obey, and we're like, yep, there it is. Christians, the church, they just want you to obey a bunch of rules. they just have a whole list. They say there's only 10, but there's way more than 10. There's all the unspoken ones too that aren't even listed somewhere. And you just got to obey, 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 obey. It's about keeping in line. Do what you're told to do. Don't make any mistakes, right? That's what we think. That's what a lot of folks think about Christianity and the church as a whole. Obey here, though, it's a little bit different than just that. It's like convince or trust or believe. It's a mindset that is less action, or it leads to action. It's less demanded behavior, if that makes sense to you. One thing that he points out here, though, is often is the case, you were running a good race. Who? Not a what? It's a person. That often is the case that bumps into you, that gets you off the course, out of the direction that you're trying to move in. So we have a saying around here that we say it all the time, and I will not get tired of saying it because I think it's so, so critical and important. Your friends determine the quality, the direction and quality of your life. The people you spend time with. I used to say this all the time with students, and it was great for students. And then I realized, oh, guess what? It doesn't stop being great at any age. This is still true. Your friends, the people you choose to spend time with, will absolutely determine the direction and quality of your life. This is what Paul is pointing to. It's like you were running a good race. You were doing the things. You were moving in a good direction. You had a good pace going. You were doing everything right. And then all of a sudden someone intersected you. Someone bumped into you. Someone cut you off and got you off track. He continues on in verse 8. That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you, the one who created you, the one who knows your name personally, the one who knows you better than you know you. And then he continues, he says, and then we get from running to a cooking illustration again. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. If you understand this means that just a little bit, just a slight nudge, just a little tiny amount of yeast or wrong choices or bad thoughts, just a little bit of something will eventually work its way through the whole thing. It will spoil it. It'll ruin it. Now, that's not true of food because I really love yeast in my food. It's fantastic. But this is the illustration that yeast is growing, that yeast is alive. It works its way through. It's not sedentary. It's not just stationary alone. It's moving. It is active. It goes through everything as soon as it's introduced into that environment. For everything you do, this is the next part of our verse. Everything you do flows from it. Everything that you do flows from it. These are Solomon's words. This is why it's so important. So Solomon has one sentence, and he has this entire full completed thought in one sentence. I love it. For everything you do. This is why you do it. This is why you guard your heart. Everything you do, every relationship you have, every decision you make about money and finances, every decision you make about your career or how you parent and your family, every choice that you make, everything that you do flows from your heart. Your heart is the source. Everything goes through your heart, comes from your heart. There's I mentioned earlier, I spent some time doing student ministries, like a lot of time. I don't mean that like a prison sentence. I did some time back in the day. I spent some time by choice to do student ministries, and it was fantastic. I loved it. But one thing I learned, specific to junior high boys more than any other demographic, if you go to a summer camp with junior high boys, there's a couple things you will learn. First of all, your nose will pay for it. They don't like to shower, and they don't like to change their clothes, but they really like Axe body spray. So they think that they're just like spraying and covering it up, and I'm like, that doesn't work. Guys, my nose is being assaulted. Like I am a victim here. Somebody help me out. Go take a shower. Change your clothes. And you look in their bag, and they only brought one set. You're like, how did this happen? I know you have more clothes than this. Why did you only bring one pair of shorts? Why did you do this, right? The whole point of this is that the source is not being dealt with by spraying some Axe body spray on top of it. There's not enough Axe body spray to eliminate that assault on my nose. The source is coming from somewhere else. You got to deal with the source in order for it to be taken care of, right? You got to deal with the source. What Paul's saying, what we're learning, The source is your heart. And if you're looking around your world, you're like, man, just things are off. My relationships are rocky. Like, I'm just not happy. I don't have peace. If you're looking and evaluating that in your life, chances are there's something that has gotten into the source that everything is touching. It's within your heart. The source is, in the case of a junior high boy, B.O. In our case, is often, it's our heart. Something is snuck in there. Something gotten in there. Let's look at a verse all together one more time. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. This is actually the New Living Testament version of this. So this is a different version, same verse. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. I like this idea that it's not just that everything flows from it, but your heart actually has a current itself. That we talk about the world and society and the culture around us, it has a current. It'll move you in a direction that you can't just float stationary. It will take you somewhere. But your heart has a current as well. So we better make sure that our heart is uncontaminated, that current flows in the direction that we were created to flow in. I used to go to a day camp when I was little guy, so with my grandparents' church, long time ago. And one of my favorite parts is every single year they had boat races in the creek, and we would take like egg cartons that were made of styrofoam or something super healthy, and we would put like a little flag on there that was supposed to be a sail that doesn't work at all. But everybody would have a starting line. We'd dump all of our boats into the creek all at the same time, and there's a finish line like down the creek a little ways, and we got to see whose boat was going to get there first. There was no strategy. There was no like ability to be better at this than anybody else. You just hope that your boat made it. The thing about it is every single boat moved in the same direction. They did not end up in the same location, but there was not a single boat that ended up on the other side of the starting line. Every single boat went down the creek. Why? Because that is where the current was flowing. And that's true of society, and that's true of our heart. So if we want to fulfill the thing that God has created in us, that God has called us to do, He's placed that potential in you to do that thing in this world and in this life, we have to protect it. We have to make sure that current is protected, that it is guarded, in order that we can move in the right direction that God has created us to move into. We don't guard our hearts because we're supposed to, because someone told us to, and we're like, yeah, I have to do what I'm told to do every single time, so I better guard my heart. No, I guard my heart because my heart is important for how my life goes. The health of our heart directly determines the length and overall experience of our life. And it doesn't matter if you've crossed the line of faith. Like if you're wrestling with faith, you're not really sure where you stand in all this, you're just kind of listening, you're like, okay, maybe, I guess. It doesn't matter where you're at. The health of your heart determines the length and overall experience of your life. That I promise. That I guarantee. We dare not take this lightly. So I told you we're going to listen from Solomon, we're going to listen from Paul, and then we're also going to have a statement from Jesus. Jesus also taught on the subject of a well-protected heart versus an unprotected heart. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 35, this is what he says. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him. And an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. Do you see that? Like it's pretty clear that the things that are the same is there's a person and there's things and then there's some type of storage unit in us. And there's a person and there's things and then again stuff stored up. But it's the same currency for both. It's the same currency. Stored currency purchases the same outcomes as the currency that is stored up. This is why we try to make wise choices and decisions, because then the outcomes will also be wise and good and healthy in our life. There's so many verses on this. There's so many pieces to this, and I know we could go on and on and on about this all day, but the overflow of your heart, the overflow is where you hear the words and you see the actions. But long before there was a word or an action that is experienced by others around you, there was a thought, like I talked about before, that was in there. Right? And if you're looking at your life, you're like, I don't know, church wants me to be apparently healthy, but I'm not supposed to have like sexual immorality. I'm supposed to be honest, supposed to tell the truth, supposed to, all these things. I'm not supposed to be greedy, right? All these things. Envy, not supposed to do all those. Here's the problem. Wrong thoughts undermine your current and your future. Your current experience and your future. Wrong thoughts, let's keep it with sexual immorality because that's fun. Everyone wants to talk about. But if you're having like the wrong thoughts when it comes to sexual immorality in your life, eventually that will undermine your current relationship as well as your future relationships. That's why we talk about purity. That's why we talk about this idea that we are protecting something. And we might not even know the person that we're protecting yet, but we make sure that we're protecting it because it is the most important relationship that we have on this planet. We say it this way: purity paves the road to intimacy. It's not that it guarantees intimacy, but it makes it so much easier. Right? Purity paves the road to intimacy. This relationship is so critical and important. If you think you want to have a good marriage, then you do whatever you can now to protect it so that it can be healthy later. Otherwise, you're fighting an uphill battle. Otherwise, you're already in that current and you're like, man, I got to paddle harder because this is hard work. You're right, it is. There was a way a while ago that would have made it easier. If we could be clear. This right here is so critical and it's so important. I know, let's move on. Nobody wants to be greedy. Nobody wakes up in the morning and they're like, you know what, today I'm going to be greedy. That feels right. Feels like I want to do that. But the hard part about greed, we don't know where that line is. It is gray. It's like, am I being greedy? Is this about me? Is this not about me? I don't know. I'm just trying to make, it's hard. It's hard to see greed in the mirror. What about arrogance? Arrogance is a lack of humility. We know we're not supposed to be arrogant. It drives me nuts. I hate arrogance. I hate to just, from a distance, I'm just being vulnerable here with you. I don't like arrogance at all. And this is, why do we love, I'll just talk about me. I'm being vulnerable for me, so I won't speak for you. I love watching arrogant people fail. It's one of the greatest joys of my life. I'm just being honest. Like pride comes before a fall. I love watching the fall. Like, can I just fast forward to get to the fall? Because that person, this is what I think. That person thinks they're better than me. And the fall proves that they're not. It proves what I already know. You're not better than me. I know it. I'm just waiting for you to fall. Like, I know that's a broken piece of myself. I understand this. This is just a little bit of me getting it out there. I'll deal with it later. Yeah, I'll pray about it. That's what I'll do. But what is that in us? It's a thought that's worked its way in for the person that's arrogant as well as me that is hoping somebody else fails. That's that's a bad part of me that I need to work on. Christianity isn't about rules. In the right context, Christianity is not about rules. It's about a relationship and moving in a direction towards the most important relationship of all time. It's following Jesus. And his teachings, his example, lead us in a direction. And when we use wisdom, we move in his direction. We move towards health. We move towards these things that we experience, not just in eternity, but right now. Peace, joy are available to you today. And it doesn't matter what you're experiencing, what your circumstances are right now. This is the beauty of protecting your heart. The beauty of protecting your heart is regardless of what you're up against in life, you can still be moving in the direction that you know you need to move in. You don't have to get intersected by circumstances that totally destroy the plan and the hopes and dreams that you had. Because we can choose to protect our heart, this thing that is most important. And when we protect our heart, we maintain the course of our life. We keep the wellspring of our life uncontaminated. And by doing so, our life is fuller. Our life is better. Not necessarily easier, but it is better. So a couple questions. How is your heart? Has anything snuck into it? We all have to evaluate this. Maybe you're just hating on the arrogant people that you know, but has anything snuck into your heart, into this thing that's supposed to be protected? And you're like, you know what? I see a few things that are rising up. I see a few areas that probably shouldn't be in there. It is impossible to guard effectively if it's done so secondarily. It has to be the priority. If guarding something is a back burner thing, you're not going to be very good at guarding it. Case in point, I have two wonderful, amazing dogs. And you might say that they're not great, well-trained because they eat food that's available to them. But I'll tell you what, for our illustration right now, if I make lunch and I put it within their reach and I say I'm going to guard my lunch, but first I need to go to the other room, I will not have a lunch. It will be gone. And they will be licking their lips, right? We can't guard secondarily. We have to guard primarily. It's got to be the first thing. It's got to be the most important thing, just like what Solomon says. Above all else, guard your heart and your lunch. When you guard your heart effectively, you will remain on course. When you do this, you will remain on course. And Jesus, he was inclusive. He was not exclusive. He was not looking, when you look at his ministry, he was not looking at ways to cross people off the list. Like, don't have to bring them to heaven. Like, that's not what Jesus was doing. He was looking for any way possible to draw people in to a relationship with a Heavenly Father. He's like, you guys, I want to make this path available for you. I will do whatever case. God sent Jesus on a rescue mission for you. This is not about getting crossed off a list. This is about getting gathered and drawn into this relationship. God wants you so much. He wants you with him so much and in a relationship with him so much that he sent his son to pay the ultimate price for you, for me, for all of us. So if we're sitting here and we're evaluating, we're like, okay, I know this is important, but I also see some areas that are unguarded. And they've been unguarded for a while. And if I told my story, you'd probably cross me off the list. You would say, yeah, that's probably too far. You would say that's too far. You've gone too far. You've done too much. Nehemiah was the perfect illustration. There was no wall left. There was no gates left. And yet he chose to rebuild it as an illustration for us today that we can look at and say, if it's important, we should do it. Because once the wall is rebuilt, once we've done the work, and it's going to take work, it's going to take blood, sweat, and tears. It's going to take effort day in and day out. It's going to take discipline that we don't want to be disciplined in. But if we do this, eventually that wall will be built. Eventually that heart can start to be cleansed again. And if you want to know when the best day to do that, it's today. Start now. Don't wait any longer. The consequences are real for our actions. I'm not saying that just because you're like, okay, I'm going to follow Jesus, so that eliminates the consequences of my choices before, right? No, it doesn't do that. It's a change of course, not a change of what you're carrying, right? Sometimes we have to carry the consequences with us. Some of you are carrying some consequences right now. And sometimes we think that those consequences actually eliminate us from this opportunity. Like, you know what? It's too far. I'm too far gone. Let me give you another illustration. We've been talking about Solomon a lot this morning. Solomon's context is David and Bathsheba. David is his father. Bathsheba is his mother. David saw this beautiful woman across the way when he probably should have been out with his warriors fighting a battle. And instead he sees this woman and he calls her to his palace and she gets pregnant. Problem is, she's already married. So he brings home the husband, Uriah. Oh, by the way, Uriah, also a warrior that was fighting in the battle that David should have been at. He calls Uriah home. He's like, maybe if they spend the night together, then maybe he'll get confused whether he's the father or not. Uriah is so honorable. He's like, I'm not going to spend the night with my wife because none of the guys I was risking my life with are able to do that, so I'm not going to do that either. David at this moment, he's like, oh no. My plan to fix all of this is gone. So he sends Uriah out to the front lines and then instructs everybody else to step back from it so he's by himself. Essentially, David murders Uriah. This is a man that's described as a man after God's own heart. David dealt with some consequences of these choices and decisions. I mean, it got pretty messy for him. And he didn't right away, he didn't immediately repent and change his way. He had to hear this from some pretty specific people in order for himself to receive the message and the reality of what he'd done. Yet, God was not done using David. Yet, there was still an avenue for David's heart that had gotten some stuff worked in there to be made pure, made clean. Again, in fact, he writes about this in one of the Psalms. This is David's own writing in Psalm 51. After the whole thing, he's evaluating all this. He's thinking about this. He says, create in me a pure heart. I bet he prayed that. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. This is all of our prayer. If you're sitting here this morning thinking, I'm too far gone, the rest of these people, they probably got their life in order, and they got it all figured out. But me, I'm too far gone. No, this is all of us. You know why? Because we're all too far gone. None of us are good enough. We can't earn our way into having our access to heaven. None of us can earn our way into a relationship with God. It has to be given. It's freely given. But all of us are sinful. All of us have made choices that we are not proud of, that we wish we hadn't. David had to deal with consequences too. And yet, there is an opportunity. There's a pathway forward for his heart to be made pure once again. Out of all that, David marries Bathsheba. That initial baby did not survive, but the next baby that they had was Solomon, the third king of Israel, the wisest man to ever live. There's still redemption available in spite of our poor choices and decisions in life. So cleanup does not exclude you. Also, just because you're unguarded and you're like, well, nothing's happened so far, that's not a good reason to keep on going that way. Like if you're riding your bike and you don't have a helmet on, you're like, see, it's fine right now, I didn't crash. Just wait. It's going to happen. And if it happens, you don't have a helmet on, it's going to be a problem. You got to wear that helmet, right? So, we must, all of us, if we're not already, we must start guarding that which is of utmost importance in this life. Proverbs 4:23, favorite verse. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. It is too important not to. I have a couple of discussion questions because I don't want what we just talked about to stay in this room. This guarding your heart has to be a conversation, has to be a thought process, has to work its way out of this room and into your life, into your choices, into your decisions. So, some discussion questions for this morning. How is your heart? Is it guarded or unguarded? What guardrails do you need to put into place? Next question. What are the areas you know you need to reinforce to protect that which is of utmost importance? And finally, if you have some cleaning up to do, what needs to be done? What's the first thing you need to do? And when can you start? You need to have a conversation with someone. You need to make a phone call. You need to reevaluate your finances. You need to try to draw back that relationship that's gotten away from you. You need to apologize. You need to ask for forgiveness. Don't wait. Don't wait. It's too important. Too important. Let me pray. Be done. Dear Heavenly Father, you are good. You are so good. And we are not. We are broken. We are bruised. We fail over and over in this life. We project. We pretend. We think. God, I pray that we would have a real, honest conversation with ourselves and with you about the condition of our heart. I pray that our pride would not get in the way. I pray that our arrogance would not get in the way. Because this gift that you've given us, this unique piece that makes us who we are, is too important not to guard it, not to do something about it. And God, I pray that you would give us the wisdom to see it, what needs to be elevated, what needs to be changed, the cleanup work that is necessary, the wall that needs to be rebuilt, the gates that need to be put back in place. I pray that you would allow us that vision to see it, and you would give us the courage and the strength, the persistence to do it, the patience to see it through. Because at the end of that is where our relationship with you is strongest. That's where we start to move in the current that you placed in us to start with. So God, I pray that we would trust you, that we would lean into you, and we would take the steps that we need to take today. In your name I pray. Amen. Thanks for being here with us. We hope that you have a great week. We'll see you next week.